my bread alone. Yeah, this word got food in it. Stepping on the devil dome. You should see the bruise in it. Backing out the scripts. Told a demon to stand down. Go against the Most High. We gon' see how it pan out. The Father gave me hope. Fill me with the ghosts. Now they hate it when I glow. Joseph with the coat. Looking for their fruit, but they ain't got no cantaloupe. The Messiah over Lio, you can't be a fan of both. Can't serve two masters. Bread of heaven with the living water, yeah, serving up a truth platter. We ain't idolizing no folly, now we setting up a new standard. When Christ touched down, make the whole earth shake like Bruce Banner. Yeah, bringing them troops to ya. End times getting spookier. Warfare getting nuclear. Mankind getting goofier. They intoxicated with a wine, damn, she done roofied them. I'm checking every word. Spirit doctrine like a proofreader. I hate these Nicolatans. Hate these graven idols, man, I hate these flipping pagans. Trying to play my father and I hate these imitations. Screaming out Hosanna, we escape that simulation. Better flee to me, vote these or else that lake is where you layin'. Great is he inside of me, casting out this net like I was by the Sea of Galilee. Harvest gon' be plenty, but the laborers are few. Matthew 17 and 20, there ain't nothing we can't do. I can't be no lukewarm, fringes with the blue on. Devil wanna deal, but I told him this ain't Groupon. Praise to the Almighty, you know we gon' sing a new song. Hail the King of King, the Ultra Low, no Jimmy Neutron. If you keep his laws and his commands, then we can fellowship. I don't get with Pharisees and I don't rock with Hellenists. I ain't praising man, cause only Father get my reverence. I'm swimming in the word, it got me feeling like a yellowfin. Yeah, big stepper, Mr. Demon Chin Checker, trying to hear that well done, cause I feel that displeasure. Father pouring out the wrath, and he got a big measure. If it ain't about the kingdom, then I don't give a six letter. You got faith in the Messiah, you got power. I was clean up in that blood just like a shower. Isaiah 5, you were the vine that came on sour. But now we stand and giving glory in this hour. Yeah, we breaking them curses, fleeing the ways of the serpent. Follow his word and pray for discernment, cause they want us laying in hearses. We gotta rise up, raise and resurface. Choose life and stay in your purpose. The price was paid like a merchant, through Christ who came as a servant. See, the kingdom is really the bag, but yet somehow they chasing a Birkin. After this you ain't getting a chance. While you living you can't but search him. Gotta call on his name like his urchin. Never knowing that day is emerging, so repent at the weight of perversions. Judgment coming, that thing is for certain. Let's go.
All right, Shalawam, Shalawam, family. First and foremost, I'm going to give all praises, all glory, and all honor to the Most High God, whose name is Yahawah. Of course, I do so in the name of his only begotten Son, Hamashiach, Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. It's your brother, Yasharahla. And you guys see the title, right? Should we be keeping Passover here in America? Right? We'll be diving into Deuteronomy 16 and 5. And then we'll also go into the House of Bread feast day calendar, and we might do a little Q&A, right? Before we dive into the topic, this should be a shorter live because it's not too much that we'll be covering today. But make sure you guys are liking the video, sharing the video. If it's on your heart, you can super chat as well. All right. So before we dive in really quickly, let me go ahead here and just get a couple of plugs out really quickly. All right. Any questions, family? Go ahead and put your questions in the chat. All right, any questions? Feel free to put your questions in the chat. All praise to the Most High. So, really quick, let me go here. Get everything set up. All right, all praise to the Most High. So, Passover is around the corner, right? And I'm not sure how long some of you brothers and sisters have been in the truth. Some of you guys, this may be your first Passover. Some of you guys, this may be your fourth, fifth, however many Passovers, right? And one thing for sure, two things for certain is every year around Passover, right, leading up to Passover, right, we see a bunch of wild stuff happening within the community. There's always some type of controversy. There's always some new doctrine, right? Bug out season is upon us, right? We brothers and sisters who are more seasoned in the walk, you know, we know that this time of year is sifting season, right? And with that being said, it's important that you don't allow Satan to sift you out of this truth, right? It's important that you stay girded. It's important that you stay rooted in the Word of God, right? Put a one in the chat if you watched Friday's lesson about the green olive tree, Romans 11. Put a one in the chat if you watched that lesson. All praise to the Most High, right? So when it comes to agriculture, right? When it comes to planting seeds, right, reaping harvest, when you plant a seed, the first thing that grows is the root, right? The roots are what grow first, right? If I'm not mistaken, the Hebrew word for root is sharash, right? Sharash. And it's a very interesting word, right? Especially when you look at Hebrew with the Paleo Hebrew characters, right? So you have the shin, right, which looks kind of like a W. It almost looks like teeth, right? Then you have the resh, which looks like a backwards P. Looks like a backwards letter P. Really, it's an R, a reverse R without the little tail. And then the last character is another shin character, right? So what's interesting about the word for root in Hebrew, sharash, is that you can literally see how that word came to be and how it come to describe the word that we see as root, right? So when you plant a seed, right, the first thing that grows is the roots. The roots start to grow down, and then the stalk starts to grow, and it pierces the soil, right? It starts to collect energy from the sun. The roots bring up the water so that the plant can engage in photosynthesis and eat and grow, right? And it's just interesting how that word is, right? The first thing that grows is the roots. The roots essentially sink into the soil, right? Kind of like how teeth sink into food, right? So the root of the plant, it sinks into the soil, right? And it draws up nutrients, and then it sends that nutrients up to the stalk and to the leaves, so that the plant can live and thrive, right? So when it comes to this walk and being in the truth, you got to be rooted, right? You got to be rooted in the Word of God. If you're not rooted in the Word of God, then it's very easy for you to get sifted out. It's very easy for you to fall by the wayside, right? Being a Hebrew Israelite is not a fad. It's not a trend, right? Understanding that so-called Black, Hispanic, Native Americans, that we are the children of Israel, and understanding that we are God's chosen people, understanding that we have to keep faith in Christ and maintain obedience and keeping the commandments. That's an important thing, right? And it's not a fad, right? You have to be rooted in the word. You have to be rooted in the first principles of the oracles of God, right? So us diving into this topic, right? Again, during this time is sifting season, right? Satan wants to sift you out, right? Satan wants to remove you from that number, right? Of course, the scriptures say that there are some that are going to rise to everlasting shame, and there's going to be some that rise to everlasting life, right? Scriptures talk about there being two resurrections. The scriptures talk about eternal life, right? Being written in the book of life, right? You don't want Satan to root you out of the book of life, right? And the easy way for Satan to do so is by you not being rooted in the word of God, right? So that's what's important, right? And of course, here at the House of Bread, right, our motto is Matthew 4:4. Man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, right? We have to be rooted in the word of God, right? So with that said, let's go ahead. Let me share my screen. Make sure you brothers and sisters are tapped in with us. Give me 1 second. Let's get this. All right. So again, if you guys are not subscribed to House of Bread here on YouTube, right, make sure that you're subscribed to the House of Bread channel, right? What's going to start happening is camp videos. Any of my street teachings, they're going to be posted here on House of Bread, right? So if you want to look at my street teachings, right, they're going to be here only at the House of Bread. Actually, go ahead and there we go, right here, House of Bread camp on YouTube, right? So subscribe, make sure you hit the notification bell so you get notified whenever we go live or whenever we drop a video, right? We are simulcasting to this channel as well. Of course, make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all right? So when you come to the channel, there's a ton of videos. Under videos, a lot of these lessons are typically done live. So you always want to check live as well, right? Last 2 days ago, we just did the Romans 11 breakdown, right? That was live. Next Friday, we will be diving into the parable of the prodigal son, okay? And today, as we are getting ready to enter into Passover season, right, we have to ask this question about whether or not it's lawful to keep Passover in America or not, okay? Additionally, make sure that you are you follow House of Bread here on YouTube, right? Follow us here on House of Bread, not YouTube, on Instagram rather, right? And why, right? When you come here, right, there are links in our bio, okay? Because we're going to dive into our calendar in just a bit. If you want access to our feast day calendar, right, you go to Instagram, you go to House of Bread, okay, underscore between every word, and there's a bunch of links here, right? This link right here will bring you to our current feast day calendar, right? You can download this straight off Google Drive, right? This is a PDF, okay? And this is how you'll be able to access our feast day calendar. People ask me all the time, oh, where's you guys' calendar? The calendar is going to be in our bio here on Instagram, okay? So make sure you tap in here, right? Additionally, make sure you tap in with my one of my Instagram pages, laYAHAWAH, right? Passover is around the corner, right? Get your orders in ASAP, because when we get closer to Passover, I'm not going to have time to fulfill any orders, right? As we would be preparing for the feast ourselves, right? So tap in with me at Gedalia_Ariala, get your finest bust down tassels, all right? Additionally, make your way over to HIBofficialzion.com and get you a copy of the Hebrew Israelite Bible, all right? So let's take a look at the Bible real quick, right? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 16. All right, so Deuteronomy 16:1. It says, observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover unto the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord thy God of the flock and the herd, in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there. Right? So what we got to understand when it comes to the book of Deuteronomy, right? These passages, these commandments, right? Some of Deuteronomy is a reiteration of previous commandments. Some of Deuteronomy is not reiterations of previous commandments, right? I'll give you an example. Deuteronomy 17, right, where it tells a king not to multiply wives and horses and chariots unto himself. That's not a repeated law, right? Deuteronomy 22 and 12, which says, thou shalt make the gadolium on the four corners of thy vesture, tassels, right? That's not a reiteration of Numbers 15 and 38. Numbers 15 and 38 is a completely different word. Numbers 15 and 38 mentions the ribbon of blue. Deuteronomy 22 and 12 does not mention the ribbon of blue, right? So Deuteronomy, right, there are repeated laws, and there are some things that are clarifying on previous laws, right? But then there's also laws here that are just new laws, right? Also in mind, Deuteronomy it starts to be given as we're getting closer to entering the land, right? And with that in mind, we have to look at this context. I'll give you an example, right? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 7. So it says, Deuteronomy 7 and 1, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land, whither thou goest to possess it. So we're getting ready to enter into the land, right? The Most High God gives us this command. It says, and has cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Right? So the phraseology, the Lord is going to bring thee into the land. We're getting ready to enter into the land. So this is an example of what I'm speaking of, right? So let's continue. Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 3. It says, thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction. For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou comest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life, right? So let's unpack this really quickly, right? 3,000 plus years ago, when the children of Israel were in the land of Egypt, right? When you make bread, right, you take flour, you take water, right? In order for that bread to rise, you would have to give it time to do so, right? You would mix flour and water, right? And the natural yeast in the environment and on the grain would start to eat away at the sugars and the carbohydrates within the grain, right? It'll, of course, go through the metabolic process, and it'll create bubbles, air bubbles, right? And that's how things were leavened, right? It's called today is known as a sourdough starter. Okay. So when we're looking at why we keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread, is because we had to leave Egypt in haste. We didn't have time for the bread to rise, right? So with that said, let's continue. It says, and there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coasts 7 days, right? So let's take a look at this, right? In all thy coasts, right? Gabalika, right? So coast, borders, your coast, where you're bound, your landmark, space, limit, right? Your territory. So during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right, you're not supposed to have any leavened bread. Anything that is leavened, right, or any leavening, you have to get rid of. Now, for years, I didn't understand the Torah in that way, right? I didn't understand this, and I didn't understand, for instance, Exodus chapter 13 and verse 7, which says there should be no leaven found within thy borders, right? Within thy gates. So what I used to do is I would take, let's say, my baking soda, my baking powder, right, and my baker's yeast and whatnot, and I would put it in my trunk of my car, or I'll put it in my shed. You don't want to do that. Don't do that, right? That's incorrect. According to the law, right, you are not to have any leavened bread within thy borders, within your land. Okay. So it says, where we at? There shall no leavened bread with thee. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction, for thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt. In haste thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life. And there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee. It shouldn't be seen with you. Shouldn't be anywhere around, right? In all thy coasts 7 days. Neither shall there anything of the flesh which thou sacrifice the first day at even remain all night until the morning, right? So when it comes to the Passover, when you sacrifice the Passover, that lamb is not supposed to, you're not supposed to save it to the morning. You have to burn it before the morning, right? Now, verse 5. Brothers, read this, not understanding the context of when Deuteronomy was given, right? As we're getting ready to enter into the land, right? It says, thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Excuse me. We're gonna unpack this verse, because verse 5 is very important, right? We're going to read through verse 8 and we're going to come back to verse 5. It says, but at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name, there thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even, at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. And thou shalt roast it and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt turn in the morning and go unto thy tents. 6 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein, right? So let's go back to verse 5. It says, thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Question, family. What are the gates that the Lord thy God giveth us in the context of Deuteronomy 16 and 5? What are those gates? What are these gates? Anyone? What are these gates? It says, thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. What are these gates? Anyone? The land of Canaan, right? We were getting ready to enter into the land of Canaan, right? We were supposed to go in and take the land from them, done them off, right? Get rid of them. And we were supposed to keep the commandments and remain in the land, right? That's what we were supposed to, right? So the context of this, again, is within any of the gates which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Is America the gates that the Lord our God giveth us? Jehu said home. Yeah, our homeland, right? The land that we were going to possess. No, not your body. Is America the gates which the Lord our God giveth us? No, it's not. Deuteronomy 16:5. Again, this is given to the children of Israel as they're getting ready to enter into the land of Canaan, right? To conquer it. Okay. And we're being told not to sacrifice the Passover in any of the gates that the Lord give us. Just you can't. If I live in, let's say, Shechem, I can't just sacrifice the Passover in Shechem, right? If I lived in, let's say, Gilead, I can't just sacrifice the Passover in Gilead, right? Let's say I was in Hebron, I just can't sacrifice the Passover in Hebron, right? But it's telling us that the Lord's going to choose a place to set his name, and there we are to keep the Passover, right? This is in context of the land. We're not in the land right now, right? We are not in the land, right? Deuteronomy 16:5 does not apply to America because America is not the gates in which the Most High God gave us, right? Or he was getting ready to give us in the context of Deuteronomy 16, right? If you live in the UK, the UK does not apply, right? If you live in Jamaica, you live in Mexico, you live in Canada, none of those places are the gates which the Lord thy God have given you. We are in the land of our captivity, right? And the reason why we are in captivity is because what? We did not keep the commandments, right? So now, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 18. Actually, let's go to Deuteronomy 30 first. We'll go to Deuteronomy 30, and then we'll go to Deuteronomy 18. Okay. Let me know if y'all following along, right? So Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 1, it says, "And it shall come to pass when all these things come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee, and shalt return unto the Lord thy God, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, that thou and thy children with all thy heart and with all thy soul, that then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. And the Lord thy God will circumcise thine heart and the heart of thy seed, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, that thou mayest live." So we see here, right? This is a prophecy in the law, right? It shall come to pass, right? When we've received the blessings, when we've experienced the curses, we'll remember and call these things to mind. We'll remember ourselves in the lands of our captivity, where the Lord has driven us, and we will return unto the voice of the Lord our God and obey his commandments, right? If we don't do that, if we don't keep God's commandments, we're just going to stay in the lands of our captivity. Obviously, every single prophecy is for an appointed time, right? And it will come to pass when the Most High God deems fit, right? Every vision is yet for an appointed time, and in the end it shall speak, right? So this is the vision, this is a prophecy that will come to pass. So the word of the Most High God does not return unto him void. In order for us to get delivered, we have to keep the commandments. We have to obey his voice according to what? All that I command thee this day, right? We have to teach it to our children. And then the Lord's going to turn our captivity. Then he's going to have compassion on us. Then he's going to deliver us and gather us from all the nations and bring us back into our land. So in order for us to get delivered out of Babylon, to get delivered out of America, we have to keep the commandments. Part of keeping the commandments includes keeping Passover, keeping the feast days, right? Now, obviously, right, we're not, when a brother sins, right, we don't have a place to go and bring a sin offering, right? We don't have a priesthood. We're in exile, right? But we still keep the commandments that apply to us, right? For instance, I'm from the tribe of Judah. There are particular laws that apply to the Levites, right, and to the priests. For instance, right, the Ark of the Covenant. Let me ask y'all, who is allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant? Who's allowed to bear the Ark of the Covenant? Let's see who paid attention in Bible study, right? Who's been reading their Bibles? Who is allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant? Christ is not allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant. Christ is from the tribe of Judah. Sister Kai got it right. The Levites. The Levites are allowed, are the only ones that are supposed to touch the Ark of the Covenant. Mind you, it was a Judite. It was a Judite that built the Ark of the Covenant. Right? Bezalel. No, not Melchizedek. Right? The Levites. The Levites are the only ones that are allowed to bear the Ark of the Covenant. Right? In the Bible, the Ark of the Covenant was stolen by the Philistines. And a result of that was the Most High God sent a whole bunch of plagues against them. Right? They took it and brought it to the temple of Dagon. Right? The next morning they came. Dagon was prostrate on the ground in front of the Ark of the Covenant. Right? They came back the next day. Dagon's idol was broken. Right? Then they took the Ark of the Covenant. They sent it to another Philistine city. There were 5 cities of the Philistines. Right? And it goes from city to city. All these plagues come upon them. Right? Then the Philistines they take 2 ox that had or 2 cows that never had a yoke put to them, right? Took a ox cart, put the Ark of the Covenant on it, and sent it to the land of Israel. Sent it into the land of the Israelites, right? Because the Most High God was jacking them up, right? When David conquered Jerusalem, he wanted to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, right? To Zion. And what did David do? David had a brand new ox cart built to bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh to Jerusalem. And as the story goes on, one of the ox fell, and the Ark of the Covenant began to fall off of the cart. And a man passing by who was not a Levite, right, an Israelite, he tried to bear up the Ark of the Covenant, and he dropped dead. Now, all of that happened because David had the Ark of the Covenant moved from Shiloh to Jerusalem in a manner that went against the law. The Levites were supposed to bear it on poles. That's how they were supposed to move the Ark of the Covenant, not on a ox cart. Okay, overcome. This puts you in timeout because you're just chatting. Okay. So the Ark of the Covenant is only allowed to be touched by the Levites. Okay. I, as a Judite, I could not touch the Ark of the Covenant. Right. there are things that the priests are allowed to do that I, as a regular layperson, would not be allowed to do, right? Another thing, actually, let's go here really quickly. Leviticus chapter 10, right? Now, this particular passage gets taken out of context, has been taken out of context by brothers in the past, and they've used this as a proof to try to say that dreadlocks are unlawful, right? Because it's a misunderstanding of what's going on here, right? So here we are in Leviticus chapter 10 and verse 1. It says, and Nabad and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them in his censer and put fire therein and put incense thereon and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. Right? The Most High God gave the priest specific things that he wanted burnt unto him as incense, as an incense sacrifice, right? Verse 2, it says, and there went out fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. So God killed these Levites, right? These priests, sons of Aaron, killed them for burning the wrong incense. Then Moses said unto Aaron, this is that the Lord spake, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said unto them, come near, carry your brethren from before the sanctuary out of the camp, right? Because this is death, right? Anything that's dead has to be taken out of the camp, right? Because a dead body defiled, it makes something defiled, right? Verse 5, so they went near and carried them in their coats out of the camp, as Moses said. And Moses said to Aaron and unto Eleazar and unto Ithamar his sons, uncover not your heads, neither rend your clothes, lest ye die, lest wrath come upon all the people, but let your brethren, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning which the Lord hath kindled. We have to unpack this, right? This gets taken to say, oh, uncovering your heads means, oh, you can't let your hair go unkempt. No, it does not mean that. To uncover your heads literally means to shave your heads. Why? Because that was a sign of mourning. When we would mourn the death of someone, right, we would shave our heads. But the priests, right, especially Aaron, he's the high priest, right? The priests are not allowed to defile themselves. The high priest is not allowed to defile himself with a dead body for anyone. The high priest can't go to anyone's funeral, right? This is what this is going into, right? So if I lost someone, a loved one, and if I was in that state of mourning, right, I could rend my clothes, right? I can throw on sackcloth, I can shave my head, uncover my head as a sign of mourning. Aaron's not allowed to do that. Moses is telling Aaron, Eleazar, and Ithamar, don't uncover your head. Let the rest of the house of Israel bewail the burning which the Lord hath kindled. Right, verse 7. It says, then ye shall not go out from the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die. For the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you. And they did according to the words of Moses. Right, so they were anointed to do the office of a priest, right? And they were not allowed to defile themselves, to pull their heads, bald their heads, and rent their clothes to mourn for the death of their son and their brothers. Simple, right? That doesn't apply to me because I'm not a Levite. I'm not a priest, right? I can, of course, in mourning, shave my head, rent my clothes as a sign of mourning, right? But see how this doesn't apply to every individual? There's laws specific about women, right? Frank, let's get you out of here. I don't got time for you today. So again, see how not every particular law applies to every individual. Now, does that mean that we just say, oh, screw the law, we're not going to keep it? No, right? The law is holy and good. It's the standard what's right and what's wrong, right? And it has particular applications to particular individuals, right? Now, of course, there's the vast majority of laws apply to all of us, right? Wearing fringes, keeping the feast days, right? That are not committing adultery. That applies to all of us, right? But when it comes to mourning, the high priest would not be allowed to do that, right? High priest can't go to a funeral, right? Actually, I'll show you, right? Leviticus, I think 21 is the chapter. Regulations concerning priests, right? And the Lord said unto Moses, speaking to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and said unto them, there shall none be defiled for the dead among his people, but for his kin that is near unto him. That is for his mother, for his father, and for his sister, and for his daughter, and for his brother, and for his sister a virgin. So let's say, all right, we got priest LionOfYahawah here at House of Bread. Let's say he's just he's a regular priest. He's of the course of a Bible, what have you, right? If his mom or his dad, right, or his son or daughter or his brother died, right, he can go to their funeral. If his sister is not a virgin, if his sister is married, he can't go to her funeral. If he has a sister that is a virgin, right, and she dies, he can go to her funeral, right? It says, but he shall not defile himself, being a chief man among his people, to profane himself. They shall not make what? Baldness upon their head. Neither shall they shave off the corner of their beard, nor make any cuttings in their flesh. They shall be holy unto their God, and to not profane the name of their God. For the offering of the Lord made by fire, and the bread of their God they do offer. Therefore they shall be holy. So the priests are not allowed to go to funerals for anyone other than their near kinsmen. Okay, it goes on to say, they shall not take a wife that is a whore or profane, neither shall they take a woman put away from her husband, for he is holy unto his God. Right? It would be unlawful for a priest to take a woman that's a widow. Right? It'll be unlawful to do so. But an Issacharite, a Judite, a Danite, an Ephraimite, they can do so, right? And actually, this is for the sons of Aaron, the priest. So not every Levite is a priest. So a regular Levite would be able to do so, right? Let's continue. It says, they should not take a wife that is a whore or profane, neither shall they take a woman put away from her husband, for he is holy unto his God. Thou shalt sanctify him, therefore, for he offered the bread of thy God. He shall be holy unto thee, for I, the Lord, which sanctify you, am holy. And the daughter of any priest, if she profane herself by playing the whore, she profaneth her father, she shall be burnt with fire. So, if a regular Israelite woman commits adultery, plays the whore, as the Bible puts it, her and the adulterer get stoned with stones. But the daughter of a priest, if she does something like that, she gets burnt with fire. These are two individuals getting treated differently under the law, right? Two Israelites being treated differently under the law, right? So again, this goes to show that we keep the law, right? We uphold the law. We regard the law, right, as being pure, good, holy, and something that should be observed. However, there's certain laws that you physically cannot observe because they don't apply to you, right? I would not, if I go to Leviticus 7, which goes into certain sacrifices, right? Leviticus 7. Priest part in the offering, right? This don't apply to me, right? This doesn't apply to me. I bring the sacrifice to the Lord. Part of it belongs to the priest. The rest of it's for the Lord. Simple. I don't get to eat of that, right? Because there's things specific for the priest. Okay? So, when we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 5, let's go there one more time, right? This does not apply to us today because if I keep the Passover like we did last year, right? Evening came in, we slit the lamb's neck, right? We drained the blood, we put the blood on the doorpost, we skinned the lamb, we seasoned it, put it on the grill, roasted it with fire, right? Ate it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Beautiful, right? We did this in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is not one of the gates which the Lord our God have given unto us, right? So brothers take this and they use it as an excuse to not keep the feast days, right? To not keep other feast days, right? And that's a problem. If we want to get delivered, we have to keep the commandments. So let's go 2 chapters later, right? Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 18. It says, and I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren like unto thee, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. And it shall come to pass that whosoever will not hearken unto the words, to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. What does that mean? All right, let's look at this in the ESV. It says, whoever will not listen to my words that he speaks shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him. Meaning, I'm going to hold you responsible for not listening to this specific prophet that I raise up and put my words in his mouth. And this prophet is who the world calls Jesus Christ, shanyam-ishar. Right? Now, when we take a look at, again, and understanding Deuteronomy 18, verses 18 through 19, we have to look at the words of Yahawashi. Right? So Luke chapter 21, right? Verse 7, it says, then came the day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Yahawashi sent Peter and John, saying, Go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat it. They said unto him, where will you have us prepare it? And he said, behold, when you enter into the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house that he enters, and tell the master of the house, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room furnished, prepare it there. Right? So Christ is telling the disciples to prepare the Passover. Right? It's a Passover. Verse 14, it says, and when the hour came, he reclined at the table, and the apostles with him. And he said unto them, I earnestly desire to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I would not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. So Christ was not going to eat Passover ever again, because he was getting ready to be killed. He was getting ready to be sacrificed as the Passover lamb, right? It says, and he took up a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, take this and divide it among yourselves. For I tell you that from now on, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And likewise, the cup after they had eaten, saying, this cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. But behold, the hand of him who betrays me is with me on the table. For the Son of Man goes as it has been determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. Right? So the point is verse 19, right? Do this in remembrance of me, right? Keeping Passover. Part of keeping Passover is eating the lamb, right? And eating the unleavened bread, the bitter herbs. We do this now in remembrance of Christ because he is our Passover lamb, right? So if you don't keep Passover, how can you keep this? How can you not be deemed guilty of not listening to the words that Yahawashi spoke, which ultimately were the Father's words? You can't, right? So there it is, right? You keep the commandments, keep the Passover. Okay. So now let's like I said, it's gonna be a shorter lesson today. Right. Let's go into our feast day calendar, right? So of course, us here at the House of Bread, we keep the lunar Sabbath, right? We don't keep a fixed Friday to Saturday Sabbath. Okay. So when you look at our calendar, right, I designed it so that it's very easy to follow along, right? You have the month, right? This is the first month, Abib, right? You have the feast day. You have the day in which it falls in. You have the actual date, right? So as you can see here, right, this is March 8th, March 18th, Wednesday, March 18th. That would be new moon or the new year, right? Now, if you look at the calendar, you got to note that a Hebrew day is from evening to evening. All new moons, with the exception of the seventh new moon, is a Shabbat, right? A Sabbath, Shabbat. The yellow highlighted days are Shabbathwan, i.e. special Sabbaths. All Shabbat restrictions apply to these special Sabbaths, with the exception of cooking / kindling of fire. Okay, so in the first month, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right, is a Shabbathwan, right? During the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we are to what? Eat unleavened bread, right? Cook unleavened bread. So this is a Shabbathwan, right? When it says no servile work, that means don't go and work for Esau, right? Don't. Only thing that you do is things concerning the feast, right? So preparing for the feast, things of that nature, right? So this is the Shabbathwan, right? This is the 15th day of the month, right? The calendar lets you know when the 10th day of the month is. So if you're keeping Passover by yourself, within your home, right, within your family, right, you go and you separate your lamb on the 10th day. Okay, so that falls on Friday, March 27th, right? That starts the 10th day. So Saturday the 28th is still part of that 10th day, for the record. Okay. And then, of course, you have Passover on the 14th day, right? Passover is March 31st, Tuesday, March 31st. The sun goes down on March 31st, right? That's when you slaughter your lamb, right? You roast it with fire, right? Don't break the bones, all that good stuff, right? And then the next day is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? Going to the 7th day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that is a Shabbathwan, right? And the next day, day 22, would be the next Shabbat. So, of course, when it comes to the lunar Sabbath, the Sabbaths fall on the 1st, which is new moon, the 8th, 15th, and 22nd of the month. And then you wait to the next new moon to keep your next Sabbath, right? So the calendar is very easy to understand, right? Very easy to read, right? I made it so that there shouldn't be many questions, right? You look here, right? We got the feast, the 7th month, where we have the Feast of Trumpets, right? That is new moon. It's a Shabbathwan, right? No servile work, right? We have our pre-atonement Sabbath, the 9th day. Then we have Day of Atonement on the 10th day. Then the 15th day is a Shabbathwan. It's the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. No servile work, right? Day 21, that's the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the 22nd day is a Shabbathwan, right? No servile work. So it's very, very simple and easy to understand. Now, I was asked I did a quick little poll here on YouTube, right? And I asked people what topics brothers and sisters wanted to dive into, and brothers wanted to know how I went about calculating the calendar, right? I'm gonna show you in just a bit. Any questions, family? right? Where we at? Any questions? No questions? All right. Okay. Let me pull up. All right. So obviously the Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar, right? So we have to look at the moon phases, right? So what I do is I go to timeanddate.com, right? I go to sun, moon, and space. I go to moon phases. Click moon phases, it brings you here, right? Now, looking at this chart right here, it lets you know, right, when the new moon and the time in which the new moon appears, right? So what I do is I take this, I copy this chart right here, I copy and I paste it into Excel, right? So let me go ahead and remove. Right. I'm a spreadsheet type of guy, right? So I take this spreadsheet, right, and I copy and paste this into Excel, right? This is my clipboard, right? I take this, I put this in, right? Now, let's say, for instance, if I were to copy and paste that last lunation, right? I would paste that, right? One thing that you have to pay attention to, right, is the date, right? Because what it's going to default to is the current year when you're pasting it, right? So I make sure that when I'm doing this, I have the right year, okay? So now from there, right, I go to this sheet right here, right? So I have the new moon dates for the year 2025, right? The year 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, right? So now I'm going to figure out, right, when I'm going to set my new moons, right? So here we have February 27th, right? This is for the year 2020. Actually, let's go down to 2026, right? So here we are, 2026, right? I just come here, I type equals 817 or B17, right? And I do that for every month, right? Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind is the time in which the new moon appears, right? You got to pay attention to the time in which the new moon appears. So, for instance, right, the new moon appears at 4:29 in the morning, right, on March 8th. Now, we know that a day is evening to evening. So, instead of typing in here equals and clicking this, right, I'm going to type equals that minus 1 because one day prior is the 7th, right? So it's appearing at 4:29 in the morning, right? That day started earlier, right? So I'm going to set that as the 7th. Now, I like to try to track out a couple of years just to make sure I'm keeping the feast days within their season, right? So this year, right, today is February 22nd, right? We are currently in the 13th month of our calendar, right? We had a second Adar, right, in our current calendar, right? The new calendar, which you guys saw the link to, that's for next year's calendar. And next year is technically March 18th, right? So sometimes you're going to have a 13th month, right? And it's all going to depend on the seasons, right? If I did not put a 13th month this year, right, then that means that this would be the first day of the first month. And that means that Passover would be on March 2nd. It's too early. That's too early, right? So that's why I went with a 13th month, right? A second Adar, right? Then we go down, right? Here we are, right? February 6th of 2027 will be new moon for the 12th month of this year that's coming up, right? New moon for the first month will be March 7th, right? Take that plus 13, right? March 20th. March 20th for Passover. That's within season. That makes sense, right? So again, that's why I didn't go with the 13th month then, right? So once I do this, I determine my new moons, right? I have another sheet, right? Let's go to, and now what I do is I start laying out the calendar, right? So all of my dates here, right, are coming from here, right? It's coming from this spreadsheet that I created, right? If you're not good with Excel, right, it might be hard for you to follow along with this, right? But this is how I determine the feast days. I let math do it, right? So let's just go to a simple month, right? Let's go to the third month, right? So here we have third new moon is on May 16th, 2026, right? Okay. And so here's the date. Now the Sabbath is going to be 7 days later. So here I just go and I click equals this plus 7. And that brings me to May 23rd. See how it's Saturday, Saturday, Saturday. If the new moon falls on a Saturday, then the Sabbaths are going to be on a Saturday. The new moon falls on a Sunday, the following Sabbaths are going to also be on Sunday. So now I'm just using, right? I'm just using math, right? Equals this plus 7. Bing, bang, boom. Very, very simple. Right now, when it comes to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? This is the Sabbath, right? It's from the morrow after the Sabbath, right? You bring the wave offering to the priest, right? And you count your 7 Sabbaths, right? I counted my 7 Sabbaths. I landed on this is the 7th Sabbath. Now, from here, May 23rd, 2026, to get to the Feast of First Fruits, I had to count 50 days from the morrow after the Sabbath, and I landed on Monday, July 13, 2026, right, where we will be keeping the Feast of First Fruits, right? Again, that's a Shabbat one, no servile work. Very, very simple. What if the new, so I'm not worried about a different time zone, right? I'm focused on when the lunar phase is within my time zone, right? So that's how I determine the calendar, right? And if you're a member of any camp, right, your leader is doing it. I'm not sure how they do it per se, but they're not doing one for each time zone, and they're not going to all those intricacies, right? That's a good question, brother. So Corey Robinson says, why is there no command in Leviticus 23, numbers 9, Deuteronomy 30 to drink wine on Passover? That didn't come until Matthew 26, 17 and 19 at the new covenant. So, one, Matthew is not the new covenant. Christ saying that this is the blood of the new covenant, right? This represents the blood of the new covenant. Represents. Was it actually the blood of the new covenant? No, because he didn't die yet, right? So, Corey Robinson, you have a fundamental misunderstanding of the old covenant and the new covenant. There's no such thing as an old covenant. There's just the covenant, because the new covenant doesn't exist yet, right? No one's under the new covenant, right? But again, when we look at Deuteronomy 18 verses 18 through 19, we are required to listen to, adhere to the words that Yahawashi would speak, because they're ultimately Yahweh's words. Yahawashi is the word of God. He is the word of Yahweh. So what he spoke, those are the words of the Father, right? He said, as I hear, I speak, right? So when it comes to drinking wine for Passover, Yahawashi told us to drink this in remembrance of him as well, right? So we do that as well, right? So you're going to eat your lamb, you eat your unleavened bread, your bitter herbs, right? And you're going to drink your wine in remembrance of Yahawashi. Simple. Okay. So that's how I go about doing the feast day calendar, right? It's all mathematical, right? And then it's just a matter of plugging in the other feast days. Like, so boom, here we are in the 7th month, right? I know that the pre-atonement Sabbath, right, is supposed to be on the 9th instead of the 8th, how it normally is. So it's normally 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, right? In the 7th month, right? The first day of the month is the Feast of Trumpets, which is a Shabbathwan, right? It's a special Sabbath. You do no servile work, right? And you offer, right? We would have offered an offering to the Lord by fire, right? We don't have a priesthood, right? So we're not doing that, right? But it's a Shabbathwan, right? So you keep the feast, you congregate with your friends and family, right? Brothers and sisters in your congregation, right? And you enjoy the feast, right? Then you have the pre-atonement Shabbat is on the 9th. So what do I have here in this sheet? I have this cell plus 8. 1 plus 8 is what? 9, right? This would be the 9th day. Okay. Then Day of Atonement is the next day. Okay. And then the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles is on the 15th day, right? So I just have this plus 14, and it gets me that date. And then this is just simply this plus 1. And I just drag that down so we get here, right? And here, right? Then we have our 8th new moon, right? Saturday, October 10th at 2026. This equals that plus 7. This equals that plus 7. This equals that plus 7. Very, very simple, right? So I do it like that. That's how I determine the feast days. All right. Any questions? Now, once I go from here, right? Once I go and I determine all the feast days, right? This time dating, right? I have another sheet. What is that? Another tab called Civil Twilight. Right? Civil Twilight is essentially last light, right? I get this right here. I get this right here from timeanddate.com, right? I copy, I paste everything in here, right? So what comes up is actually this stuff, right? And the way that they do it, right, is 2 different cells, right? So here, of course, I just put the dates, right? And I just run this right down, right? And it lines up perfectly with these, right? And then what I do for this is I do an X lookup, right? Again, if you're not familiar with with Excel, right? There's tutorials you can find on YouTube on how to use Excel, how to do lookups, things of that nature. So I have this set up so that it's going to look up within that Civil Twilight tab. So look up this date. It's going to find this date and it's going to return an entry for the start time. And the reason why I do this is because once I'm done creating the sheet, I export this as a CSV file, right? I export it as a CSV file, and then I can take that CSV file and I can upload it to my Google Calendar, right? And that way, all of the feast days, as we've determined, are on my phone, and I actually have access to on my calendar, right? So, oops. So here's my Google Calendar, right? I got Shabbat 2 right here. Oops. See that blue 22 the next day? Boom. It's the Shabbat, right? So I have it in my calendar, and that's why I do this so that I can just export it as a CSV file, upload it on Google Calendar on your web browser, and it'll add everything for me. I don't have to worry about let's say printing out a calendar. It's right there on my phone, right? Any questions? Can you break down how to calculate the new year? Okay, so the new year, right, is just the first. There you go. It's just the first new moon of the year, right? A year is made up of months, right? A month is determined by the lunar phases. The word month and moon etymologically are the same, right? So, right, here we are, right? I went into why. Actually, let me go with this one, right? I went into why, for instance, this past year, right? So right now we are currently in the 13th month of our 25 to 26 calendar, right? March 18th will be the first day of the 26 to 27 calendar, right? So the reason why we went with a 13th month for this year is because when we're looking at New Year, right? From last year, okay, fell on February 27th, right? February 27th. If we only did 12 months, right? If we only did 12 months, that means that Passover would be on March 1st. It's too early, right? The feast days are for appointed times and within the right season, right? So because of that, right, that's why we went with the 13th month, because Passover will be way too early, right? So if Passover was that date, right, that means, so this was in the first month, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, right? That means, right, let's say, for instance, that this tabernacles happened in August, is late August. It's not too crazy, but again, if I would have did that, Passover would have been too early, right? And Passover is in the springtime, right? This would have been way too early, right? And then, like, for instance, 2027, right? New moon will be on February 6th, right? 2027, right? March 2027, first new moon, right? Will be the new year, right? If I would have made this a 13th month, right? If I would have made this a 13th month, that means that this would have been the 7th month, right? September 29th, right? So if I take September 29th and I add 14 days for the Feast of Tabernacles. Tabernacles will be held from the 13th from October 13th to October 19th, right? It's gonna be freezing, right? We're getting really, really close to the middle of fall, right? When it starts to get real cold. That doesn't make sense, right? So again, determining the feast days starts by determining the new moons, right? I get those by going to timeanddate.com and finding the lunations, right? And you can go from year to year, right? So let me remove this. Share screen. Right. So right here, this is 2026. I can go all the way to 2039, right? Lord willing, we're not here, right? I'll know when the new moon appears in all of these months. Okay. So I copy and paste this. I put it in my spreadsheet. I only use these figures to determine when the new moon falls, right? Again, depending on the time of the day, right? It's going to determine whether you're going to do a day prior or not, right? Once you do that, then you can fill everything else in there. Any other questions? New Year is in the springtime. New Year's in the springtime. New Year's in the springtime. Yeah, when we go, like for instance, let's go to Exodus. Exodus. Let's see something. Exodus 12. Let me do this. All right, so boom, right? Watch this. Exodus chapter 12. Let me remove the strong number, right? It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speaking unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their father, a lamb for an house, right? So this is preparing for Passover, right? Now, this is the springtime, right? Now we go to the next chapter, right? Where are we? Right. Boom, right here. Exodus 13:3. And Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which ye came out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of the hand of the Lord brought you out of this place. There shall be no leavened bread be eaten. This day came ye out in the month Abib, right? So when we look at the word Abib, right, it means green airs, right? Fresh, young barley ears, right? Month of air forming, of greening of crop, of growing green Abib. Month of Exodus, the Passover, around March, April, right? So with that said, right, Abib is going to typically fall in March or April, right? Around March, April. So that's the beginning of the year, around March or April, right? Now, the barley in Israel will turn green, will start to turn green. The ears will start to turn green around this time, right? That means that they're young, right? Doesn't mean that they're completely ripe, right? Because people like to say, oh, well, first fruits, blah, 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 blah. Well, you can't have first fruits if it's young, if the ears are green. If you know anything about planting, right, you have first fruits, and you have fruits that are, I guess, delayed, so to speak, right? There's every time you sow a seed, right? You sow seed in the field. Some are going to germinate faster than others. Some are going to grow faster than others. It's just how agriculture works, right? So when you're planting your barley, your corn, right, your grain, whatever, some are going to mature earlier than others. Those are your first fruits, right? Fruit comes from seed, from the plant. Some are going to come earlier, hence the phrase first fruit, right? So yeah, you would keep the feast of first fruits based off of the first fruits that you harvest. The rest of your harvest is not going to be harvestable, right, at that time. If that was the case, then it wouldn't be called first fruits. It would just be called fruits, right? So the ears of the corn are green, right? They're young, right? Let's look at this word, meaning to be tender, green, i.e. young ear of grain. Hence the name of the month Abib, right? Young, it's young. Simple, right? So that's how you know. Yep, exactly. Let's take a look at this in the ESV because I don't know what the word bold means. Right. The flax and the barley were struck down, for the barley was in the air and the flax was in the bud. In bud, right? It's starting to bud. Like we got this blizzard that just came, right? And early this week, it was really warm, right? It was warm, it was raining. I was like, oh snap, like this is perfect, right? It's my garden is gonna start coming back, right? But now we got this blizzard. Hopefully it warms up and this snow can melt. But you know, we're not too far from spring, you know what I mean, or the beginning of when you start to get first fruits, right? Things start to bud. Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Also, another thing, right? Looking at Deuteronomy 16 and 5, right? And just looking at Passover in general, right? The first Passover we kept in the land of Israel. I mean, in the land of Egypt. First Passover was kept in the land of Egypt. The second Passover would have been kept in the wilderness. The next 39, right, would have been, the next 38 would have been kept in the wilderness. The next Passover was kept at Gilgal, right? When we read in Joshua 5, they kept Passover in Gilgal. So they passed over to Jordan and they kept Passover in Gilgal, right? Lord didn't place his name there, right? So for 40 years, Passover was not kept in Jerusalem, right? Jerusalem, the temple was destroyed, right? We had no active priesthood. We were exiled, right? So therefore, again, Deuteronomy 16 and 5, right, where it says, you may not sacrifice the Passover within any of the gates which the Lord thy God giveth you. We're not within those gates. So that wouldn't apply. All right. Any other questions, family? Like I said, this is going to be a shorter lesson. All right. Make sure you guys are tuned in. Make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. Make sure you subscribe to House of Bread. right? Make sure you subscribe to House of Bread. I'll put a link in the chat, right? Make sure you guys are subscribed to House of Bread, right? If you need to get our feast day calendar, right? Our feast day calendar, you can find it here. You can download it here in our bio, House of Bread Camp on Instagram, right? So you come here, click the link in our, give us a follow, click the link in our bio, right? This link, right? Feast day calendar 2026 to 27, right? And you can download that PDF, okay? You can print it out, whatever you want, okay? So make sure you guys tune in, actually. Give me 1 second, actually. Make sure that you guys are tapped in, right? So that you can stay tapped in, right? We have a new broadcast channel on Instagram, right? So in this broadcast channel, right, I'm putting the link in the chat. Join the broadcast channel so you can be alerted when we got new lives. Because sometimes I know YouTube, like a sister yesterday, she said, I'm subscribed and I got the bell icon, but YouTube doesn't send notifications, right? YouTube be like that, right? YouTube does that. They be shadow banning people. They be doing all types of nonsense, right? They don't want our people to get edified, right? So in order to combat that, right, we created this broadcast channel. Click this link right here, right? Join the House of Bread broadcast channel. We'll be giving updates for all types of stuff, right? Any lessons that are going on, they'll be posted there and you guys can tap in. What I also will be doing, Lord willing, we'll be doing private lives for individuals who are actually subscribed to the broadcast channel on Instagram, right? So we can do Q&As, all types of stuff, right? And that's something I want to offer to brothers and sisters who are in the broadcast channel, right? It don't cost you anything, right? It's all free, right? But those lives would be for individuals who are subscribed to the broadcast channel. Linda Grace, just quick question about halal food. It's considered cleanlier than typical meat, but are we allowed to eat it? No, you do not want to eat halal meat, right? Reason being is because in order for something to be considered halal, right, it has to be slaughtered in the name of Allah, right? So let's say they got a goat, right? They got a goat, and they'll say Bismillah, and they'll slaughter the goat, right? Which means in the name of Allah, right? Allah is not our God. Allah is a false pagan god of the Ishmaelites, right? So if you eat halal food, you're eating a food that has been sacrificed unto an idol. You do not want to eat food sacrificed unto idols. That's something that Yahawashi hates, right? Something that will get you killed, right? Passover, right? You sacrifice the Passover lamb in accordance to God's word, right? Feast of First Fruits, Feast of Tabernacles, all these different feast days, right? There are sacrifices that are made to our God, right? They are sacrificed in the name of Yahawah, right? And you worship or partake in the worship of Yahawah by eating the foods that are sacrificed unto him at the temple, right? So the same thing would be true for a pagan god like Allah, right? Okay. But yeah, family. So make sure you guys tune into that broadcast channel next Friday, right? We will be diving into the parable of the prodigal sons, right? So make sure you guys, right, come through, hit the notification button, right? So you get notified when we go live. It will be live next Friday. Well, this Friday, live this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. So make sure you guys tap in there as well. All right. All right, family. Any other questions? If not, we're going to wrap it up. Any other questions? You're welcome, Sister Linda. All right. But with that, I want to give all praises, all glory, and all honor to the Most High God, whose name is Yahawah. Of course, I do so in the name of His only begotten Son, Yahawashi, who the world annually calls Jesus Christ. Until next time, Shalawam family, and Matawathya.